Live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Scarlett Fu.
And I'm Tim Stenovec. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto. We'll look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
Bitcoin hits another record high, the debasement trade helping to drive investors to safe haven assets like crypto.
In just a moment, we're going to speak to one of the most prominent voices in the crypto industry, Katie Haun, founder and CEO of Haun Ventures. She manages billions in investments across digital assets and was an early believer in stablecoins.
And as part of her investments, Haun is connected to prediction markets. And today, we learned that Intercontinental Exchange plans to invest as much as $2 billion in cash in Polymarket.
That's all ahead over the next half hour right here on Bloomberg Crypto. First, though, a check on what's going on with Bitcoin. Look at this, year to date up 30%, hitting a fresh record on Sunday, climbing to $125,000 per Bitcoin. We're just shy of that right now. Let's go ahead and round that up, 122,000. It was driven over the weekend by investors seeking safe haven assets due to the U.S. government shutdown. Now, what's the next stop? What's the next move? Well, options traders Scarlett are now adding to bets that the crypto will rally to $140,000 by 2026.
And of course, with that kind of bullish outlook, the fund flows into Bitcoin ETFs, they're on a big roll. It turns out investors poured $3.2 billion into a group of 12 U.S. Bitcoin ETFs last week. That marks the second highest haul since those funds launched back in 2024. And there seems to be a lot of momentum behind it, Tim.
Well, let's get to our first guest of the program. Delighted to bring in Haun Ventures founder and CEO Katie Haun. She's held key positions for Coinbase and Andreessen Horowitz. Before that, she spent a decade as a prosecutor at the Justice Department. She created the first task force focused on cryptocurrency. She joins us live today on Bloomberg Crypto. Katie, welcome. I want to start just with the price action. I mentioned a new record for Bitcoin, $125,000 on Sunday. How are you watching this? Too far, too fast? Is it warranted? Just weigh in there.
Well, I want to take a step back here and realize something. I don't think this is talked about enough, and that is that Bitcoin right now is the 7th largest asset by market cap in the entire world. And for those of us who have been in this space for over a decade, like myself, that's really extraordinary. And I still think we're so early and just at the tip of the iceberg. You know, you just had Jamie Dimon interviewed. He's talking about the tip of the iceberg with AI. I feel the same way with crypto as an asset class. And of course, Bitcoin included, chief among that.
Absolutely. October has historically been a big month for Bitcoin, its best performing month overall. To what extent does the current macro environment, we're talking about stubborn inflation, long-term fiscal concerns, as well as the current political environment, the government shutdown being the most obvious example of the political dysfunction, create a perfect storm for those who are bullish on crypto, bullish on Bitcoin?
Yeah, sure. Well, we're hearing a lot these days about in this short term right now, the debasement trade. And it's kind of extraordinary to hear Bitcoin called a safe haven because, of course, it's still a risk asset and it's still, again, very early. But I think what I'm going to back up and not just talk about the government shutdown, because obviously the macro picture always has historically influence crypto. But I think that what you're seeing with Bitcoin right now, it's still the institutional adoption story. And I think we're very early in that institutional adoption. You saw a little bit of that in the last cycle, kind of in the 2017, 2018, and then also in 2021 and 2022. But I think that institutional adoption story just continues, and it's just getting stronger. I mean, you mentioned ETF record inflows. You know, IBIT, BlackRock's crypto ETF, Bitcoin ETF, is the most profitable ever ETF, and it's only been around for not that long compared to other ETFs that have been around for 20 years. So I think you're seeing more and more signals of institutional adoption. You're seeing really a whole crypto economy and even a Bitcoin economy emerge.
One part of the economy that is seeming to grow each and every week is digital asset treasuries, DATs. And one thing that I'm wondering from you is where we're seeing money flow inside and outside of that space. So because DATs are gathering so much money from investors right now, Katie, how is it affecting venture investment in crypto outside of that space?
Yeah, you know, DATs is not an area of focus for us as
Why
a
not?
fund. Well, candidly, we can also hold the tokens directly through our fund structure. And so we prefer to just bet on the underlying assets themselves. I'm not writing off DATs as a category. I think they're an important tool, but it's not an area of focus for our fund in particular. But I still think it's an overall very small part, growing part, but still small of the crypto ecosystem.
I want to ask you about Bitcoin insurers. Your Haun Ventures just announced an investment in Meanwhile, which is a Bitcoin insurer. Can you explain why this investment makes sense to you? What is it about Bitcoin that makes the cryptocurrency relevant for life insurance products?
Well, I think if you back up and look at life insurance as a category, it's a really important underpinning of financial services and products and services in this space. I mean, it's a really, also there's a tax advantage to life insurance products, and it's a $3 trillion market opportunity. So I think the fact now that you're seeing Bitcoin life insurance being offered is just a reflection of how broad how far Bitcoin's come.
We're going to talk more about stablecoins next block, but we have time for one more question on this. And you've been so enthusiastic about stablecoins of late. You were an early adopter in stablecoins. But if we were speaking 4 years ago at this time, I feel like you'd have that same enthusiasm for NFTs. And no question that NFT trading volume has declined. It peaked a while back. Convince us right now that, and look, it's apples and oranges, but convince us right now that stablecoins have staying power.
Yeah, well, look, you're talking about, and you're right that 4 years ago, I would have been talking also about stable coins. I mean, I've been talking about stable coins on record since 2018, and I was on the board of Libra, Meta's original stablecoin project. And we've made a number of bets in the stablecoin space to include Bridge, which was our portfolio company that was acquired by Stripe for over $1 billion in cash earlier this year. And then we've also made bets in the space, including in BVNK. And I think one of the things was to show the staying power of stablecoins is the stablecoin supply keeps growing and growing. If we were here 2 months ago, we would have said there's $250 billion worldwide of stablecoin supply. Today, that number is $300 billion. And did you know, by the way, that, Tim, we're closing in on that stablecoins will soon be the 10th largest holder of U.S. Treasuries in the world. That's extraordinary.
All right, that's a perfect place to leave it for now. We're going to get back to this conversation on stablecoins. Katie Haun is staying with us. In the meantime, we do have some breaking news. President Trump is hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney over at the White House. And some of the headlines that have been generated from that meeting is President Trump saying that we've come a long way over the last few months and that we've made compromises even on steel when it comes to trade. The two, says the president, will be talking about tariffs. And of course, we'll keep you posted on any further developments here as the two speak. This is Bloomberg Crypto.
When I got here, this place was a raging hellhole where people would come from Canada, people would come from other places and end up getting shot. Nobody's being shot.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Crypto. We're back with Haun Ventures founder and CEO, Katie Haun. Katie, I want to continue our conversation on stablecoins. You mentioned that you were an early investor in Bridge. It was purchased earlier this year for $1 billion in cash. It does seem like every few weeks we're hearing about more non-financial firms exploring uses for stablecoins, and we're hearing about the growth of stablecoins as an industry. I'm curious, though, about how you look at these in the sense of, are they commodities? Is one stable coin the same as the next stable coin? How do you separate the good stable coins from ones that perhaps are not so good?
Well, I think you have to take a step back again here and realize why. You just mentioned more people are getting into the stablecoin space, even not just crypto firms and not just fintechs. And I think one of the reasons why that is the passage of some regulatory clarity. Namely, you had the bipartisan passage of the Genius Act, the stablecoin bill, earlier this year. And I think what that means is it opens up this space to new entrants. It's no longer, you used to hear about Tether, for example, or Circle with USDC, and Coinbase, of course, part of USDC too. But I think now what you're seeing is all kinds of banks start to enter the space. We've heard noise from JP Morgan and stablecoins, from some of the large payment networks. And you're also seeing large fintech giants announce their plans to enter the stablecoin space.
Katie, can you help explain to me how people make money on stablecoins if everyone seems to be getting into it? Tim mentioned that a lot of non-financial firms, Apple, Amazon, Walmart, Uber, they're all contemplating launching their own stablecoin.
Right. And getting back, Tim, to your question about how do you separate the good from the bad, I want to be clear when we're talking about stable coins, when I'm talking about stable coins, what I'm talking about is a fiat-backed stable coin. Okay. Of course, there are other varieties of stable coins. We saw this in the last cycle. We saw experimentation with algorithmic stable coins. That's very frontier. But when I'm speaking about stable coins, I'm talking about fiat-backed. So there is an actual dollar, for example, in the case of USDC, backing a dollar in a bank account, backing every USDC in the case of that particular brand of digital currency or stable coin. In terms of how people make money or entities make money, I think this is a really important question. There's a debate going on right now in DC that I think folks need to start paying more attention to, and that is the yield. And the question really is, who is going to keep the yield? You ask who makes money off stable coins? Well, right now, in the case of some of the large stablecoin issuers, there's a yield on those deposits. So when there's a dollar, for example, deposited in a bank account, there's interest paid on that dollar. And so who's capturing that yield? And I think one of the really interesting things about the Genius Act is that it bans so-called yield-bearing stablecoins from giving that yield directly back to consumers. Now, that's not true everywhere. There are some other regulatory regimes in the world that allow yield to be given to consumers. And I think if consumers have a choice, why would a consumer want an institution to keep that yield? Or would there be sharing of that yield? So right now, one of the debates going on is, will rewards be allowed? And I think these are really important questions.
Okay, so that's something that...
Yeah, you see a lot of banks, by the way, wanting to argue that they should be allowed to keep the yield and that consumers should not be allowed to keep the yield.
Yeah, that's something we'll definitely watch for as this debate develops. I want to talk about tokenization for a moment here, because there is a race to tokenize assets. You already have money market funds, real estate, private credit, stocks in the process of being tokenized. Is there any financial asset, Katie, that does not lend itself to being tokenized?
You know, really, no is the answer, Scarlett, especially as we get more rules of the road and more clarity around what will be allowed. And you see firms like Robinhood, they are offering tokenized stocks in the EU now with their acquisition of Bitstamp. And you've seen Coinbase file with the SEC to be able to allow tokenized securities to U.S. consumers. And I think we'll see this trend continue because, of course, if you think about stablecoins, which is what we were just talking about, all a stablecoin is a tokenized version of the dollar. So if you can tokenize a dollar, it turns out you can tokenize other financial products and services. And we are starting to see that. You mentioned money market funds. I mean, BlackRock has tokenized a money market fund, and that's been around for just over a year now, I guess. But you've seen other firms like Franklin Templeton enter the tokenization space. I think financial services and products are going to be the first to be tokenized. But eventually, we do think that you'll see more and more real-world assets be tokenized. So that's a space we've been following closely.
We're going to do a little lightning round because we only have a couple minutes left. So
Sure.
There's a lot we want to get to. The news today that ICE is making an investment in Polymarket. Institutional interest is certainly there when it comes to decentralized prediction markets. How do you look at an investment such as this?
Yeah, you know, we've been following this space also for a while. We're staying very close to it. I think what you see with Polymarket is you've seen, I think, this is a reflection with the ICE news out today. It's a reflection of the convergence of really Main Street and Wall Street. And I think this is a really interesting space. It's a consumer behavior that's been around for a long time. But now once you have it allowed globally at scale 24/7, interesting things can happen. So we think this is a very big market opportunity.
And Katie, final question to you. It was reported earlier this year that Haun Ventures was raising $1 billion. Did that fundraising close, and what's the latest there?
I can tell you that we are deploying out of our second set of funds now. It is a pair of large funds, and we haven't, for regulatory reasons, we haven't announced anything beyond that. But I can tell you that indeed we did close on a large pair of funds, and we are actively deploying out of that.
Okay, we do have time for one more question. You're a former federal prosecutor. In your previous life, you investigated Silk Road. You led the first crypto task force for the government. When you look around the space, where do you see concern? What keeps you up at night?
By the way, just for DOJ's first task force, not the government's first task force.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and also on Silk Road, it was the agents that were corruptly stealing from the Silk Road founder. Some folks conflate those cases, but there were a number of other early cases I was involved with in the space. I was actually asked at one point in time to help shut down Bitcoin, and what I saw as a prosecutor was when crypto rails are used, it's digital breadcrumbs. And actually, investigators and governments alike should far prefer, with nefarious activity, that is, that blockchain-based systems are used because they are much more traceable and permanent and immutable. And so I can be the first person to tell you that we never would have caught plenty of people had wires been used. Because bank wires, of course, if you've ever tried to subpoena a bank internationally, the money moves 20 hops before you're even able to get the records.
Yeah.
So the thing I do worry about, though, still continues to be insurance products, safety, security. This is always top of mind. And it's top of mind for any asset that is this large.
Haun Ventures founder and CEO Katie Haun, such a pleasure speaking with you. We'll have to get you back on Bloomberg Crypto. Thank you so much. Coming up, Ethereum co-founder Joe Lubin talks about his firm Consensys and its new partnership in the SWIFT payment system.
In addition to that, I made 7 other deals, and they're, great. And we're, things are happening with respect to Russia, Ukraine.
All right, President Trump hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney over at the White House. We just want to highlight a couple of the recent headlines. The president saying we're going to treat Canada fairly and that we will have tariffs between Canada and the U.S. However, he believes Canada will walk away very happy. We will give you more details as they cross. Tim?
In the meantime, Consensys, which is used to create apps on top of Ethereum, just announced a partnership with SWIFT to integrate a blockchain-based digital ledger to the banking system. Consensys CEO Joe Lubin is with Bloomberg's Danny Berger at the Citadel Global Markets Conference in Manhattan. Danny, take it away.
Tim, thank you so much. I should also mention not just the Consensys founder, but Ethereum co-founder and chairman of SharpLink. Joe, thank you so much for joining. Wonderful to see you. So Tim was just talking about that Consensys is being used as the technology behind this new venture from SWIFT to build a blockchain-based ledger. You're working on the prototype right now. What will that first prototype be focused on?
So I have to be careful about what I say. It's SWIFT's project. We're building it out. There will be technologists on their side and lots on our side. And I'm glad that you called it a prototype because that's what it is. It will most definitely implement messaging, financial messaging using ISO 20022. I noticed the word settlement in the press release of coming from SWIFT, and so I think they're careful to stay in their lane and focus on the messaging part, but there has been apparently some banks that are interested in potentially diving down into settlement layers.
A lot of big names involved in this, JP Morgan among them. Given it is just the prototype, do you have an idea of what sort of timeline you're working with?
I do have an idea of what sort of timeline, and I can't say too much about it. We're defining what we believe will be the end state, and we're backing that out. And so I don't know if SWIFT will be comfortable releasing the timeline at this point.
I understand you want to be careful with this. So just kind of zooming it out in this idea of large enterprise blockchain projects, because Consensys has worked on them in the past. What gives you the confidence that you can nail that this time, that it can be sticky and really widely implemented?
Sure. So we know we can nail the technology because we built the technology and we can adapt the technology to this use case. We were in Frankfurt, a bunch of us were in Frankfurt for the announcement of Swift Ledger, and sentiment has changed significantly. Since the start of Ethereum, we had to stay on our own DeFi rail. TradFi had to stay on its DeFi rail, and never should the two touch or cross or there be dragons. Horrible things would happen. The vibe in Frankfurt at Sibos was very different, and the feedback that we've heard from banks and that Swift leadership has heard from banks is very positive. It's basically about time for TradFi to merge or make use of DeFi.
Joe, you're a very busy man. I mentioned you are also the chair of SharpLink, a digital asset-based backed treasury, mostly investing in Ethereum. Over so far this year, there have been hundreds of companies that have adopted this model. They go from Japanese salons to small other companies, ones that overnight have really changed strategy. Just given the amount of companies that are doing this, and I know it's a strategy you like, but do you worry at all about oversaturation of DATs?
So I don't worry about it because I'm focused on the Ethereum DAT, ours, and some of our competitor collaborator DATs in the Ethereum ecosystem. And for Ethereum, it's a no-brainer. We were the first major one out of the gate. It lit a fire under the Ethereum ecosystem. Price has done positive things since then. And we're just happy to see more companies buy this productive asset. It's a yielding asset unlike Bitcoin. And so there's very good reason to believe that that we'll be able to do things that are non-dilutive, and we'll be able to grow the share price while growing the concentration of Ether per fully diluted share. And we're in this phase of raising money, accumulating Ether. We're building out our strategy to get the best risk-adjusted yield. And long-term, we think of this as essentially civilization building, similar to a Berkshire Hathaway-like company where you have a giant pile of capital. In this case, it's highest powered capital, uncensorable Ether. We can borrow against that. We can use it to stake in protocols. We can find the best Ethereum-aligned protocols to invest in. This is after we bought all the Ether that we're going to buy, and we stopped doing that. And so we can build out the Ethereum ecosystem and the progressively decentralizing world with this giant pile of Ether.
Does it potentially, though, add a new layer of volatility if the DATs that are buying Ethereum, that are buying Ether, if they become weak or decide not to buy, or something happens with the company? Does it introduce a new level of risk, maybe, for the overall ecosystem that you're working on?
I think it significantly reduces risk. So we will accumulate Ether at the right time. There may be times where we use our US dollar capital to purchase shares, which is still doing the things that our shareholders want us to do. There may be some ill-formed companies in the Ethereum DAT space. If they get below net asset value, then those are ripe for assimilation into some of the bigger companies. So I really think it's a dampener on volatility while enabling the Ethereum ecosystem to get built out better and faster.
Well, Joe, I know we've only just scratched the surface of the work you've been doing. I'm sure we could do this all day, but unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Scarlett, Tim, that of course was Joe Lubin of Consensys, chairman of SharpLink, and of course co-founder of Ethereum.
And a big thank you too also to Danny Berger. She joined by Joe Lubin down there in Lower Manhattan. Thanks, Danny.
All right. In the meantime, we are keeping an eye on what's happening in Washington. President Trump hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney over at the White House. He's taking questions right now and answering some questions on the government shutdown, saying that, or repeating that, in his view, Democrats are to blame for the shutdown, and also saying that Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader, is incapable of making a deal. And of course, we will keep you posted on any further headlines generated from that news conference.
That is going to do it, though, for Bloomberg Crypto. We will be back same time, same place, maybe a little earlier next week, depending on any breaking news.
But we like our breaking news.
We do like this. We do like this. There's more Scarlett coming up next, though. This is Bloomberg.